Ready, set, Rhonda.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. This is me, Ms. Rhonda B, coming to you from Voices of Mass Discussion. I am here again today because I have something to say. So we have so much going on in our streets, and most of you guys know that I'm an educator, and so what happens to our children, I feel happens to all of us. So I want to talk to you guys today, and I want to thank everybody for coming out. I know everyone has an opinion, and I'm going to allow you to share your opinion with me, and if I disagree, I'm going to cut you off. I'm just kidding, but I'm going to start off with my opinion. And right now, today, we have so much violence and so much crime in the street. Everybody's aware. Anybody is not aware of that. But I want to talk about the kids shooting kids, which everybody has an opinion about, and it affects all of us either directly or indirectly. But something that we don't talk about, but don't know much about, are kids harming themselves. I have a friend here with me, Miss Mary T, behind the camera. You can't see her. We were talking on the phone one day, and she was talking about suicide. She had taken a class. Mary's one of these kids, one of these adults who went to college, and some kind of way she remembered what she learned in the class. Not me. I went to college, that's what they're supposed to do. I can't tell you anything those teachers taught me. So, but Mary does. She'll say, I had a professor who was talking about the statistics is rising of suicides in Black youth. So, because I'm so opinionated, it's like that initially bothered me. Like, no, that's not true, because I taught, originally, my teacher career started out in Hinsdale. And so when I was out there, suicide is high, it's serious, it's real. Parents talk to you about it all the time, kids were in counseling, and parents used to say to me, this is 30 years ago, I wonder how come inner city children are so happy when they have so little. So, which is who knew why? I didn't know why. But it was a good thought that I didn't mean anything to me at that point. Then we fast forward 30 years later, and so many of our children are injuring themselves. But in addition to whenever somebody says something to me, I have a tendency to marinate. And so when she made the comment about the kids' suicide, I did start researching. I did start talking to professors, and then there's a gentleman at the North Park University who's writing a book on Black male suicide. So there is a trend, in addition to the violence we see in the street, more and more of our children are killing themselves. So I'm saying this to say because we're concentrating on what we see and hear in the media, but obviously there's a problem. Where did the problem start and where did it come from? Sometimes when I'm doing my interviews, there's this one lady who's written a book, and she had what I felt was the best answer. Because my thing is, how did we get here? She says she feels that our generation, that's me, anybody over 50, are the ones who have let our current youth down. Because even though we have nothing directly to do with the youth, because we would have been their parents, but because we're so busy wanting the American dream, the material things, we forgot about the struggle. And for some reason, without a struggle, there's no victory. And so that doesn't seem to make much sense, because why would you want your child to struggle? And it's not so much that you want that young person to struggle, it's just it's a reality, it's the natural order of things. And so for any of us who, and some of you guys I was talking to before we got started, and for any of you guys who grew up in a single parent household, or in a household where the parents are older, they always, in addition to teaching you life values, always taught you about the struggle. And that's because that's all they knew. Not because they were so much wiser than parents today, but that's all they knew. And I know my mom, I had two brothers, and my older brother, he was going through that teen thing where he wanted to be independent and rebellious and all that kind of stuff. And my mom would always make the comment to him that life does not care anything about your wants. That all of society is about what they want. So therefore, each of us have an individual want, and when the wants clash, it's the higher power that then takes over. So she was trying to get the message across to him that you have to understand that we learn to adapt to society. Society doesn't adapt to us. So that's why I tell the kids today, that's why this saying about, I brought you here, I'll take you away. That's where it comes from. Because while you're rebelling against the message that she was trying to teach in that household, her point is that the streets will kill you. But because I birthed you, it would hurt me a whole lot less if I'm the one who took that life without taking it for good. Even though as a kid it made no sense, I did, it's dead. But as an adult, it was what happened without you, I understand. Because if the pressure's not put on in the household, the kids can't deal with it in the street. So that's my take on it. Teen suicide is still low in African Americans. It's way, way, way lower than any other group, but it's still a reality. And I have a girlfriend whose son did kill himself right here during the Christmas holiday. And so, me personally, being opinionated, and have so many pet peeves, you know, you get all the commercials and the opinions and the adults, and everybody's so hung up on these kids about their past sagging or saying or whatever, you know, not pulling their hands up here. And then they say, well, I don't want to see your draw. They're not showing, those kids have on shorts, they have on sweatpants. It's a phase and an image that they're going through. I'm bringing this up to say, because I'm not saying it's okay for the pants to be sagging, but that's not our part. That's not our fight, that's not our issue with our young people. So I'm challenging everyone that's in my age group and older to take on the responsibility in the birth today, that for every young person that you encounter, to accept that it's our mission to uplift that child. Now, I'm not talking about Pollyanna and pretending, but everything about that individual, about individual use. I'm not talking about people, one individual, and just, oh, you so special. They get enough of that faith. I'm just talking about general conversations. We change our language and realize that we have to tell our kids that their greatness is already within them. Everything on the outside is the challenge of how they can realize the greatness. It's what my message to you guys today. Because kids are not just harming each other in the street, that's what we hear about. They're also harming themselves. And then in the school system, you hear about kids now cutting themselves. So where's all of this internal pain coming from? You know, and like I say, and Ms. Cox, her opinion was that our generation has let them down because we put so much emphasis on things. And so of course the kids are motivated, they want the thing. Now, did you just hear recently in the news about my point about the second pan? My girlfriend whose son killed himself was a good kid, according to us, good grades in school, never disrespectful, truly would never say his pants, always well groomed, but he wasn't okay on the inside. And we didn't know that because we were so proud of that outside. So I just feel as a friend and as a family, we let that go down. Because we did not know he was hurting on the inside because he was doing everything we thought was okay on the outside. So I would rather him be alive with his pants sagging than us having to bury him with that neat suit on. Because the pain is real, regardless of what we think about the pain. And then the other thing that I was going to say about our kids hurting themselves, everything that's happened on the outside, it started on the inside. Everybody talks about, now when we were coming up, the big problem with our parents is to keep you from getting influenced by the wrong group to end up in a gang. So today, gangs are prevalent out there, but they're more in the kids' mind. You know how many kids in that school tell us they're in a gang? You know, I'm like, boy, spell gang. You know, they got to speak special ed, they can't spell most of the time. But it's in their mind. But they identify with the gang because why? Why do you think they identify with the gang?
Well, I would say they're maybe lacking something at home. The gangs are experienced. They go after the kids that are lacking something at home, and they supply them with what they need. They supply them with that love. And actually, it's 59 gangs in Chicago, 100,000 gang members, and it's 4,000 cops.
Oh,
so go figure.
Got a real problem. But the thing is, but why do the kids identify with the gangs? Because the kids only know what they think they know.
Because a lot of young boys, unfortunately, don't have biological fathers, so they look for father figures in these gangs. And also the media glorifies gang violence and drug dealing and having multiple sex partners engaging in recreational sex. So when you have young boys that are trying to define being a man and they don't even have a father, you know, a boy can't be what he can't see. So you have this father, these young boys watching all this killing on TV, and they think, well, this is what defines being a man. Me becoming an accountant isn't cool. You know, women aren't going to think I'm hot. they're gonna think I'm a loser being an accountant. But if I start selling drugs, I can make some big money, and then everyone's gonna wanna go out with me. And that's because they're defining maleness with this insanity they watch on TV.
Okay, let me interject. Now, this here we have here in our audience is Jeffery Leving. He's an attorney, and most of you guys, if you're in the Chicago area, you've heard his commercial, let me get it right, about...
Father's rights.
Yeah, father's rights or something like that. Something about fathers have the right to be in their child's life. So he's an advocate, and I've been at other events where he's had his attorneys there explaining how they go into court to speak and to advocate on behalf of that father, which we commend you for that. But you know, but my question, okay, you have questions? But my question to you, because since you actually have the experience and you have seen these hurting fathers, is the gangs, do you only feel, or have your experience shown you that gang members are only members that did not have the father in the house?
Well, there are gang members that have fathers. Sometimes they don't have positive relationships with their fathers. But I believe that the majority of young men that are in gangs do not have any real father figure in their life that's positive. And that pushes them into gangs, and I believe that this is not something that just occurred. This has occurred over decades, starting off with government programs to provide financial incentives to mothers to exclude fathers from the family. So by doing that, there was a disincentive to mothers to promote fatherhood among their own children, because they thought they would be unable to put food on the table if dad was there. So this happened a long time ago, so the government, I believe, created an incentive to artificially create father absence, and that has created problems, because if you look at the statistics, you'll see that children that are father absent are more likely to fail academically, remain in poverty. The most reliable predictor of crime in America is father absence. So if you create a government program to exclude fathers from their families and children, you're increasing the likelihood that those children are going to not have the same opportunities as children in other communities.
So let me interject something here, because this here, I'm standing behind her, she might not know it, there's Diane Martin, and she and I often have long, opinionated conversations. She's one of the people who let me have my opinion. I go on and on and on, and she listens. I have opinionated conversations about things that happen to kids, because we're always talking about kids for some reason. The things that happen to kids, because for some reason she's like a history buff. So between her and my friend Mary, if I want to know something historically, I always bring it up to them, and then they take us back. So because you're older and you're in the profession, I want to see historically, one of my opinion is that years prior to the commercials, that fathers in our society, it was always assumed that children belong to the mother.
Right.
So historically, fathers ended up out of the picture, not to be the deadbeat that they're labeled as today. It's just that they went on to that next family, and they were good fathers to that woman who they were now with, children. So a lot of times when we said that a child came from a fatherless home, it's not accurate. They just might not have their biological father.
Right. And but there are some children that don't have their biological father, stepfather. Some won't even have either parent. Some are raised with their grandparents, and some have no family. I mean, my brother grew up in an orphanage, so he was raised by no parents.
How did your brother grew up in an orphanage?
Oh, it's a long story.
Okay.
Different show.
Okay, go on with your point.
Well, there was no grandparents because they were all deceased, so it's a complicated story.
But when you're talking to people about the fathers and not being in the house, and the implication is the father's not in the house, that they're a deadbeat, my point is that's not necessarily so.
Well,
They're not in the house because historically they said those children belong to the woman.
Right, and historically, because if you go back far enough, Margaret Mead, who people thought she was a genius, said fathers are biological necessities but social accidents. Well, and that's not accurate, but if you go back far enough when dads weren't there because they were out working incredibly long hours to put food on the table, at least the children knew that what being a man was about. But the government changed that primarily in one community, which basically took the father out of the role of the provider and put the government in that role, and that basically caused a lot of men to lose respect for who they are, which then trickled down to their children who would lose self-respect, and it became a vicious cycle, and I believe that was created specifically for one community. Now it's affecting other communities, so now attention is being brought to it because it's
What community was that?
I believe it was the African American community. It was a community that was
And this is a
created.
good point, because you know what, because that leads into this little plug or whatever. I have trouble.
It's a Diane Martin's play.
I know, but I have trouble balancing between modern technology words and my ancient old. So back in my day, it was a plugger. That's why I get stumbled sometimes. So I have this plugger in my hand, and something about this has gotten my attention because when we came in, I picked this up, and it says somebody else's baby. So along lines of what you're saying, when the dynamics of them with the welfare and the public aid will be the dad because you don't need your dad because you're not married to him anyway, and so now the mothers are married to the dad, so the fathers either had to pretend like they wasn't there, which was deceitful, which now made that man feel inferior.
Can I give my experience?
Okay, go.
Well-
Because being a man and a father,
Yes. My experience
this
is...
is tell your name first, William Martin.
William Martin. My experience with being raised by a single parent was my mother never said anything negative to me. She never...
About life or about your dad?
Oh,
Period. This period, okay.
well, that's a different story. I'm talking about, when you make mistakes, it was never anything... I can never remember her saying anything negative. She always encouraged me. She said I can do anything, regardless of the mistakes that I made.
Okay.
So, and my father, even though he wasn't there, my father and my mother had not a good relationship.
Okay.
But my father never really left.
Okay.
And he's passed now, but when I look back at the things that our relationship, what I learned from him was to never leave your kids. We were dirt poor. We were that family
Okay.
that you talked about. We could do better with my father gone, but we couldn't.
Financially.
We couldn't because what he did was he would bring food, even though he would just leave it and go. And we'd come home from school, there's food there, the back door. My friends would say, you got food back there. And then my sisters and I, we would run to the mailbox because we know it might be a couple of dollars in there from my dad. But I was still raised by my mother primarily. She was a great motivator. She was my first motivational speaker.
And let me, this is Mr. William Martin, this is his wife, Diane Martin. They are both authors, and then they have a non-for-profit organization.
Our non-for-profit is Shreveport Nitram Foundation Hearts. Heart stands for Helping Ex-Offenders and Addicts Return to Society.
Okay, but then they wrote this play called Somebody Else's Baby. So my question is, what Diane wrote.
I edited it.
Oh, you edited it.
She's
You wrote
the brain.
Okay, well then that answers my question. I'm gonna say, is that what led you to write the play based on your experience?
My experience with the play is my nephew was murdered about 15 years ago, and it hurt me tremendously because I basically raised him. His father, my brother, was out for college and doing other things, but he would come over to my house, and I would take him to baseball games. We were very, very close, and he was murdered. It's not like having someone that goes to the hospital, you go to the hospital and they're dying slowly. He was murdered. I was devastated. I dropped the phone, I started doing things. She had to bring me back from that deep, deep depression that I fell into. So that's my experience with somebody else's baby. Then I started doing a site called The Killing Fields of Chicago on Facebook. And it was a murder, 2 murders every day. I would post it. And I never got any likes. Never, but I still wanted to post it. And her experience is a little bit different from mine, but I think it sort of came together in this play and the book that she wrote, Somebody Else's Baby.
Now, did you guys have a conversation, Diane, or you just do what you do and start writing, and next thing you know, you came up with this whole concept?
Well, it's kind of what I do, but I have a couple of things that I want to piggyback on what Mr. Leving said and my husband. When you said how it only became an issue when it started to affect other communities, and we have to be real specific. What people don't seem to understand is that what we're dealing with in the black community is not something that has happened today. We've been stripping black males from their families since slavery. What you see now is the effects of all of that. What our children and what our families and what our communities are suffering from is post-traumatic syndrome. It is traumatic. See, and I don't want people to understand, if it takes 2 people to make a baby, then it takes 2 people to raise a baby. It don't have to be naturally, but you still need that balance.
Well, let me interject something here with Jeffery Leving, since you work with all across culture and across races. But aren't there some cultures that it is the norm that for when the father is no longer part of the nucleus, for them to fade away, that they believe that that's better for the overall upbringing of the child?
Yes, and for instance, Dr. Martin, one of the reasons I believe he became a doctor, even though he didn't have the financial resources, is because his mother was critical in parenting him correctly. She didn't badmouth the dad, because when you start badmouthing the dad to a little boy, then he starts thinking, well, I'm my dad, so I'm worthless. So even though Dr. Martin had very serious financial struggles, he had the maternal support that was very important to him, and that's important to everybody. Maternal support is important, especially if there's no paternal support. I mean, obviously, I've been asked this question often: who's the best parent, a mom or a dad? The best parent is both parents, because mothers and fathers serve different roles. But the problem is there are some families where there's one parent, so that parent sometimes is trying to serve both.
But we're so materialistic as a society. When there's 2 parents in the household, and this is what I experienced in the school system, okay, but I experienced in the school system, when there's 2 parents in the household and you're not doing well financially, then now you can find that with those kids to be as much of a negative effect on those children as when there's a single parent. Because when there's just that one parent, be it the mother or the dad, then they some kind of way can justify that's why we're not doing so well. But when there's 2 parents in the household, those kids periodically, when you get to talk to them one-on-one, resent that dad because they just feel that they should be better off.
Well, that's true, and the reason they resent their dad is because stereotypically the only role a father a man has in the family is that as a provider, which is wrong. They also have
That's my point.
I mean, there's a lawyer in my firm who just resigned, and he's working full-time as a stay-at-home dad because he has a lot of children, and his wife now is working. All right?
That's not too far.
So he's now Mr. Mom. But his wife is out there working real long hours. But the key is, you're absolutely right. A lot of children will resent their dad if he's struggling and can't make a living, because that's the role they're taught to believe men have, and that's the only role. Because men are meal tickets, and that's it. But that's not accurate.
Okay, and so today, for those who's listening to us on TV, we have brought together a group of people because we are going to single groupally. That's a word. And I guess it's handedly because we got a lot of hands in here. We are going to try to, one child at a time, try to make a positive difference. Because Mark, what you just said is very profound. Your mom always instilled in you that it can be done, the greatness. And I'm not talking about this Pollyanna stuff. And then I'm going to talk to a lady over here to my left because she and I was talking before this show came on. Because parents today, young parents, and this is not a criticism of young parents, because we only know what we think we know. We don't only know what we know. We know what we think we know. Because Mary and I was talking about that driving over here. We could be going in the wrong direction, but if we think we're going correctly, then what we're going to do? We're going to keep driving in that wrong direction. Even though the directions is like you need to go east on Ridge Road, but in our mind, we're thinking, no, we need to go west. So no matter how many times Diane says you need to go east on Ridge Road, what am I going to do? Keep driving west because I think I know. But I'm going to end up where? In the wrong location. So then we're going to go a little bit because I would really like to know more about the play that she did. She's written several books, so I always find her books. I'm assuming since we're talking about somebody's baby, it's not going to be like the books I read. But but anyway, but her writing is good, and then usually there's always a point because what I admire about her is that she does many things from the historical standpoint. Because we cannot change the future if we don't understand our past. You know, and the thing is, I would like to say to adults, to any of us as adults who have to work with young kids, and then I'm glad you're here because, two reasons. First of all, because you have dealt with every race and every culture. And the other thing is because we as the elders need to realize, you know, with young people, that it's okay to let them know that we're proud to be black. We didn't just happen to be black. God made, or somebody, whoever you believe in, made that decision long before it was your turn. So for me, and I can't speak for everybody, because if you're not proud to be black, then we need to talk. Because I need to convince you that it's okay. And you also need to understand to be proud to be who you are is not anti who someone else is.
That's right.
So that's the reason why this feels appropriate, because I know we see you a lot of places. You deal with all cultures and races. So when you do that, you have a tendency, like Father Flaker, you could go on any side of town because you know you don't have an internal hang-up because you're okay that he's okay with being a black man. You're not trying to be his associate because he has tried to be a dark-skinned, non-black man, regardless of whatever that is. So our kids need to know it's okay to be black. And they don't need to be ashamed of it. And do you know we apologize when we start talking about being black? Or start talking about slavery? Every other ethnic group holds on to their past. Not because they want to relive it, but because they want their children to know that in order for us to stand today, somebody had to crawl.
That's right.
And it's not our children's burden. This is one thing that we were down at Operation Push. And so they had the thing on rappers, and everybody wants to jump on the rappers. It's the rapper's fault. It's the rapper's fault. And then there's this one rapper. What's that rapper called? Flocka Rocker? Yeah, Rocker. And I really think he did an excellent presentation because he sat there and he let them pounce on him about the music and the dancing and the calling women out their name and the whole thing about how it's the rapper's fault. And like he pointed out, youth been killing youth long before there was a rap. But the other thing is he said that we, again, as the elders, have a tendency to treat our young people like they should be grateful that our ancestors paid the price that they paid so that now they can be grateful. So his opinion, being a young person and being a rapper, that's not their burden. It's not their fault that we were slaves. Not their fault that we had to struggle, we had to go. So they shouldn't pay the price because now they get to reap the benefits. Because if we're saying that things happen in the natural order that it's supposed to happen, then it's now their turn to be who they are. Our burden is to let them understand that they have greatness within them and they can try to be what they want to be. But not to try to make them carry the burden, oh, you should be glad you get to go to school, because there was a day when blacks couldn't even go into this school. That has nothing to do with them today. They need to be, and we need to be encouraging them to be good at what you do each and every day, regardless of what you do.
That's right.
That's what those people died for.
Exactly.
Because when they were coming, I know when we used to go to Tennessee to visit my grandfather, my mother's side was poor. My father's side, you know, they had made it. So when we go to Tennessee to visit him, and as a kid, you don't understand it. But when you go to, when you lived on the farms and stuff, you know, they did their own foods and all that stuff. But when you go to the city once a week on Saturday, everybody get in their truck in the back of the truck. You know, stuff that's illegal today. Everybody get in the back of the truck with no hood. And then you go to town. Okay, because then you get to spend those couple of dollars that they made from you picking cotton and whatever they did, how they got that money. So he used to tell us, walk on this side of the street, because that's the way it was back then.
Yeah.
Walk on this side of the street and look down.
Yeah.
But my father's father, because they had made it financially, was a proud black man. Because he told us to look down because I don't want you to lose your life and I don't want to die today for you.
Yeah,
But these white people will go there and I would have to lose my life. So he taught us to be proud that we were black people. Not shameful, but he also taught us to work within the society that we were in and to be good at what you do. And my grandmother was a teacher. And she taught 3rd grade. And so that's what she would always preach for young people. It starts from now. And every day, whatever our kids encounter, they need to be good at what they're doing. It's not about convincing a 10-year-old that you need to be some math genius so that you could be better off as a 20-year-old. Because kids are not that long-term. And then in our school, by me working in the city, those kids say, I'm not even going to be alive at 20 years old. You know how sad that is for somebody at my age? Because it used to be a joke, but today it's true.
Yeah.
So I tell them I'm not even worried about what's going to happen at 20, whether you know 2 times 2 is 4, because it's going to always be 4. And in this day and age, you can look it up on your phone.
Yeah.
I'm worried about you making a commitment to be good at what you're doing, whatever the assignment is we're working on. That's all I'm talking about. So we need to tell our kids that it's okay for them to be in the mindset that they're in, but to be the better. I'm telling you, your mother is the one.
Well, one thing you said about math and science, I'm an educator as well, and our society is built, well, from Obama's theory and other countries like China, they believe that math and science is more important than the social issues of social sciences. The actuality in our community, the social sciences are more important, like you said, because we have to get together socially, and that's where the disconnect is.
And our kids have to learn to be good at what they're doing today. Because my mother taught us, because my mother had this thing about we're striving for perfection because we're already imperfect. And so her theory with us in the household is I want you to have this house spotless, the corner, you know, who had to take that little towel and go, you know, already mop the floor, swept the floor, then my mother wants you to take that towel, that little rag they called it, and go around that baseboard. Because her thing is no matter how you clean that house, it still was never going to be clean enough because the dust and the park was always coming. So her point was, we just thought she was just anal about nothing, but her point was is to be good at what you're doing the moment you're doing it. We're not even talking about tomorrow, we're not talking about the kids who are going to come in with their shoes on and the floor's going to get dirty again. So as a kid, that's like, what's your point? You know, the floor's going to get dirty in a minute. But she instilled in us, like, your mom never said anything negative to you? I don't think it. But her point, she instilled in us to be good at what you're doing right now. I'm telling you, for something simple, it's washing the dishes. If they were not clean, it wasn't anything about nothing else except for coming here and let me show you. And it wasn't, you need to make me wash the dishes, you don't know what you're doing. Clearly, you didn't understand, so let me show you how you wash those dishes. Because she wanted you to do it as close to perfect as you can, because in her opinion, you still may not get it all the way clean. So if you can't get it all the way clean, trying to be perfect, can you imagine when you didn't even do a good job? And I'm coming over here to speak with this young lady, because if I'm not mistaken, I think she has some type of organization where she works with young kids. Am I correct?
Well, the name of the organization is PAC, and it stands for Prisoners Against Crime.
So you work with adults, I'm assuming.
Well, it's geared toward trying to keep kids from falling in life of crime. And what it is, I deal with prisoners, and they send me testimonials of how they ended up in prison, and they're trying to reach out to the kids from prison to try to keep them from coming to prison. And they tell, you know, they tell the kids all the gory stories about prison. You know, it's not glamorous. Once you get there, the gangs are not going to remember your name. They're not going to know you. They're not going to put money on your books. They're not going to, I have one, he's in prison. He got 60 years for something he didn't do. But he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the people he was associated with, the gang members.
Let me tell you, this is the lesson what she's saying to our kids. That's a beautiful, another entity. Because I'm gonna let you finish your story. But she's saying that the person who she's talking about was in prison for something he did not do. So then, you know, when they talk to a bunch of lawyers as to how in a free society that ever even happened, but it happened. And so for any of you guys that's over 50, I know your parent taught you that reality, especially if you had boys. They told you that you need to be very conscious of what happens in your environment every single day, because society does not care who they incarcerate as long as they give the impression that they're taking care of crime. So we have fast forwarded to this day. It's like, oh, people really knew what they were talking about then. So that this gentleman gets in jail for 60 years for something he did not do, but he's just one of many, which brings us back to somebody else's fate. You didn't care until your loved one would end up in that jail cell for something you didn't do. And then being naive, who would have thought it? I, as an educated person, would never have believed that as many people that it's turned out to be would have been in prison for something that they literally did not do. I was of the mindset, you know, by the time I got grown, I got my little degree, I moved to the suburbs, so I wasn't talking about those people in Chicago anymore. I'm always saying if they didn't do that, they did something, they just got caught. Shame on me. So that's why I'm making up for it now.